The Philadelphia Eagles are still the standard in the NFC East, but I do think the other three teams improved this offseason. NFC East positional rankings coming your way on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase. Welcome into this Thursday edition of the show, one of three podcasts we're doing this week for you, on top of our two live squad shows we do every Tuesday and Thursday. Myself, Mark Farzetta, Harry Mays, Jason Martias. We've got an hour-long show for you live on YouTube Tuesdays and Thursdays. Right now, we're in off-season mode, so I'll have 3 to 4 solo shows for you as well throughout the week until Eagles training camp, and then we're back to daily Monday through Friday right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to hype up the other teams in the NFC East today, but I do want to go over position-by-position rankings for the division and see where the Eagles still stack up compared to last year, because I do think, and again, it's all on paper, right? I'm not projecting the New York Giants to suddenly be a playoff team, and even who they were in 2022, a team that got to the divisional round and won a playoff game. I'm not saying I think that's who they're going to be this year. I think the Washington Commanders are probably going to regress this year. I think last year they certainly overachieved, making it all the way to the NFC Championship. I think the NFC is a really good conference. I think they'll probably take a step back from a year-end result standpoint. The Dallas Cowboys are regular season merchants. I think they'll be relevant in the regular season, but even if they make the playoffs, I project they're going to choke. So I'm not saying any of the other three teams in this division are Super Bowl contenders. I think the Eagles are the only true Super Bowl threat to legitimately have a real chance of winning the Lombardi Trophy this year. As much as I do kind of like a lot of what these teams did on paper this offseason, I still think the Eagles are the cream of the crop in the East. I think they're really the only team that I could see beating the Chiefs again in the Super Bowl, or beating the Detroit Lions in the postseason, or if it's Josh Allen in the big game, or Lamar Jackson. Like, I think it's the Eagles, and I just can't imagine even the Commanders, for as good as I think Jayden Daniels is and the improvements they made on paper this offseason, taking advantage of Daniels being on that cheap rookie contract right now. I don't see them getting back to where they were last year. I think they definitely overachieved. Jayden Daniels is an elite player, but I don't think they're the second or third best team in the NFC. I think they're top 5, but I'd still take Detroit. I think you could make the argument. I think the Los Angeles Rams are the second best team in the NFC. San Francisco this year might be back with a 4th place schedule. Like, they'll probably take advantage of that if their roster is healthy. So I think the Commanders probably take a step back. But with that being said, I do think all three teams did improve a lot this offseason. The Eagles did not regress from a roster standpoint, but I do want to see if they're still number one in pretty much every position of this division like they were last year. And starting on the offensive side of the football, it does look like I have the Eagles number one for every spot. And we'll start with quarterback. I have it, the Eagles number 1, the Commanders number 2, the Dallas Cowboys number 3, and the New York Giants number 4. So Jalen Hurts is the best quarterback in this division, then Jayden Daniels, then Dak Prescott, and then I combined the duo of Russell Wilson, Jackson Dart. I like Jackson Dart better than Russell Wilson, of course. Even if it's Dart, I still think he's 4th in this conference. If it's Jameis Winston, though, he's number 1 because that's our guy. Just kidding. But I do think that's the proper order, and I don't think it's even close. Jalen Hurts has had 2 of the best Super Bowl performances ever and a ring in the last 3 years, outperforming Patrick Mahomes, a top 2 player in league history, in my opinion, both times in the Super Bowl. He has I saw it on PFF today, he has the second most touchdowns of any player in the NFL since 2022, only behind Josh Allen. And I know advanced stats are really important, but if a player has the second most touchdowns in the league in 3 years, that guy's probably pretty good, right? Sometimes it's really that simple, and I think with Jalen Hurts, it really is that simple. I think sometimes we overthink football and sports in general, and Jalen has the second most touchdowns in the league. That means he's probably a top 5 player at his position. He has an MVP runner-up season in the last couple years. He has an all-time win percentage at his track record, at his career pace. Like, he's the guy in this division, and I don't think it's close. He beat Jayden Daniels by a lot in the NFC Championship. Again, he's outscored Pat Mahomes in multiple Super Bowls. He's outperformed him. Like Jalen is the guy. I do think, though, Jaden Daniels is one of the best rookies. He was one of the best rookies I've ever seen. You could make the argument outside of like Andrew Luck in 2012, that's the greatest rookie season we've ever seen. And to take that Commanders team that, again, had the second worst record in football 2 years ago and bring them all the way to the NFC Championship, getting a win on the road in Detroit, like that's no joke. And I don't think that was some RG3 like 1 year wonder. I think this is more like what we saw from Russell Wilson as a rookie in 2012, where he nearly got the Seahawks to the NFC Championship, and he did get them to the Super Bowl the very next year. I think this is who Jaden Daniels is going to be. I think he's only going to get better. Like, he is the other guy to deal with for the long term. It's Jalen Hurts versus Jaden Daniels long term in this division. I think you can make the argument he's already I'd say a top 7 quarterback in the NFL. I don't think he's definitely not top 5. I think he's definitely top 10. I'd probably put him around 7th, right? Because I'd have Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, and Hurts, and Joe Burrow. Like, those are your top 5 in any order. Then I think it's probably Matt Stafford, and then Jaden Daniels or Justin Herbert, right? So that's probably your top 7, top 8. So I respect Jaden Daniels. What he did as a rookie is truly unbelievable. That's exactly what you want in a second overall quarterback. That's the face of a franchise, a guy that elevates a roster that had no business getting that far, and he carried them nearly to the Super Bowl. Like, that's an incredible feat. I think he's number 2 by a lot. In 1 year, Jaden Daniels has already done more than Dak Prescott has ever done in his career. Like, Dak's going to put up stats this regular season. The Cowboys got better with George Pickens, but he's a regular season merchant, and he's one of the biggest playoff chokers in football. And then number 4, I like me some Jackson Dart, but I don't think he's going to play a whole lot this year, or not until the second half of the season. It's going to be Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson would be clearly the 4th starting quarterback in the East. At running back, the Eagles are also number 1, and it's not close. This is actually, I think, the worst position of this division. Like, Brian Robinson is the second best back in the East, right? Because the Giants have what? Scattaboo and Tracy, and the Cowboys have a combo of Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, the ghost of Miles Sanders. He is not who he used to be in Philadelphia. So I think it's by far the Eagles number 1. I put Brian Robinson, the Commanders, as the second best backfield. Giants 3, Cowboys 4. Like, it's Saquon Barkley, and then it gets really bad after that. So the Eagles, they have the advantage, I think, in the entire offensive side of the football. Wide receiver, they're number 1. I would say Dallas number 2, the Giants 3, and the Commanders 4. I put the Giants ahead of the Commanders, even though Washington has McLaurin and Debo. I think Malik Neighbors is going to be the second or third best receiver in this division when it's all said and done. And I don't believe that Debo Samuel will be who he once was with the 49ers. Like, that video of him at camp looked concerning. He looks slow. He looks kind of out of shape, and he's always banged up. Like, I'm not really drinking the Debo Samuel Kool-Aid with that trade this summer. I think it's purely a name at this point. And so I like Malik Neighbors, even if it's just him in New York. I like him and Darius Slayton better than I like the Commanders receiver duo. The Dallas Cowboys, I think, have the second best receiver group in this division. Like, CeeDee Lamb is the second best receiver in this division behind A.J. Brown. And George Pickens, for as crazy of a person as he is and as kind of one-dimensional as he is as a receiver, he is a big play waiting to happen. Like, he is one of the most explosive receivers in the league. He's one of the best deep threats, contested catch receivers in football. So I think that combo of CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens is probably number 2. But the Eagles have the best group. Like, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, that's the best wide receiver duo in football. So I don't think I'm being really a homer with any of this. I think on offense, it's fairly obvious that it's the Eagles, and then it's everybody else. Same with tight end. Dallas Goedert is, when healthy, the best tight end in this division. I like Jake Ferguson a lot. I think he's a very solid, high-floor player at tight end. Dallas would be number 2 for me at this position. The Commanders have Zach Ertz, who's still going strong. He's still a very solid starter. The Giants at number 4 here, but when Dallas Goedert's healthy, he's in another stratosphere than Jake Ferguson or who Zach Ertz is right now. Zach Ertz from Philadelphia would be the number 1 tight end in this division, but the Zach Ertz of the Commanders, who's still a good player, I think he's number 3. Dallas Goedert, when healthy, is top 5, maybe a top 3 tight end in football. And then the offensive line, it's the Eagles again. I think they have the best offensive line in football. Washington, though, I will say, I really like what they did, drafting Josh Connerly from Oregon, who can play right away at right tackle. They traded for Laramie Tunsil. He's your left tackle. They can slide some guys in now that started to tackle last year on the inside. So I do think the Commanders did a good job of improving that offensive line in front of Jaden Daniels. So I put them number 2, and then Dallas and New York are at 3 and 4. But I know it sounds like I'm a homer here. Not that you guys are going to hate that because this is an Eagles podcast, but quarterback, it's the Eagles number 1. Running back, Philly number 1. Wide receiver, it's the Birds. Tight end, Dallas Goedert is by far the best tight end in the East. Offensive line, I mean, you have 2 of the top 5 best tackles in football. You have one of the most underrated centers in the league, in my opinion, in Cam Jurgens, and one of the most underrated guards in the league in Landon Dickerson. So I don't think anything I said is all that crazy, but I will say, like, looking at a lot of these positions, these teams definitely did improve on paper. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, we'll continue to rank the NFC East position by position, going over to the defensive side of the football. I think on defense, it does even out a little bit more. Where do the Eagles fall at each spot? We'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. This Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in just one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. For me, online shopping has been a big bugaboo. Like, I go on eBay almost every day. I type in Philadelphia Eagles vintage, and I end up buying a sweet hat or an old-time classic Eagles watch from the 1970s, or I bought this Michael Vick football behind me in the studio. I bought a Philadelphia Eagles draft phone for like $800. I think it was like $500. I was kind of out of control for a little bit. Now with Monarch Money, I've taken control of my savings, and I definitely am being a lot smarter with my finances. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We are ranking the NFC East position by position on today's edition of the show. The Eagles are still the standard of the East. On offense, like, they have the advantage at every spot, at quarterback, running back, receiver, offensive line, tight end, wide receiver. Like, it's the Eagles and then it's everybody else. But I will say, like, all these teams improved. George Pickens is a massive upgrade for Dallas over what they had in old man Brandon Cooks at this point and who he is at wide receiver too. The New York Giants, Malik Neighbors heading into year 2, I think is going to be a star. The Commanders, I think Deebo Samuel is a shell of who he once was, but I do still think he's going to be a solid role player for that offense if he is healthy. Like, I think he's an upgrade over De'Ami Brown and Olamide Zaccheaus. So I think shout out, once an Eagle, always an Eagle, Olamide Zaccheaus, 2023 legend himself. I think the Commanders got better. I think all those teams got better on paper at those positions. And on the offensive line, like Washington, I really like what they did. Josh Connerly was a favorite prospect of mine from Oregon, a versatile piece that can play left tackle, right tackle. I think he could play guard. I think he's going to swing over at right tackle to start his career in D.C. because they traded for Laramie Tunsil as well to play left tackle. That improves their guard play because they're going to upgrade there by moving their starter from last year over to left or right guard. So they definitely did get better on the offensive line. Washington did. But on paper, it's still Philly. It's not just the East. Like, this is the most, I could do this with every team. I think the Eagles will have the advantage. It's the most complete roster in all of football, even with a lot of the free agent departures that they had. Those departures, though, mostly were on the defensive side of the football. So I will say, although the Eagles had the number 1 defense in football last year, I think they're going to have the majority of these positional advantages. It does even out a little bit more on defense with these division rivals. Like, on the defensive line, I do have the New York Giants with the best defensive line in this division. I mean, their front 7 is scary. Up front, rushing. Thank God the Eagles have a good offensive line, because on the edge, they have Brian Burns. They have Kayvon Thibodeau. They have Abdul Carter now, who's one of the best defensive end prospects coming into the draft in the last decade. They got him at 3rd overall, which is an absolute steal in my opinion, to go with, again, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, already a very, very underrated, star-powered defensive end duo. They've got Dexter Lawrence on the inside, one of a top tier, top 3, top 4, certainly top 5 defensive tackle in the entire NFL. And then they drafted somebody on day 2 that I really like. Toledo defensive tackle Darius Alexander. You guys heard me talk a lot about him on this podcast during the pre-draft process. He's a really good pass rusher, and that's your 5th option on the defensive line. Like, the Giants have a really deep, this reminds me a lot of who they were from like that 2007 to 2011 era when they won 2 Super Bowls. Like, they have kind of this NASCAR-like package now that you got to watch out for. And again, thank God the Eagles have an elite offensive line. You're still not nervous about it. But if they didn't have Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens, like, this team might be in a little bit of trouble when they play New York. So they're, to me, number 1. And then the Eagles are definitely number 2. Like, in this division, they have a top 2 player on the defensive line. I think it's Jalen Carter and then Micah Parsons. Those are the 2 best pass rushers, the 2 best players on the defensive line in this division. And I think Nolan Smith is an ascending star. I think you could bank on him. I think he's going to get 10-plus sacks. I really do think Nolan Smith's going to have double digits this year. If he's going to do what he did in the playoffs, like, absolutely 10-plus. And then you got a ton of guys that have made a ton of flash plays, like Moro Ijoma, Jalix Hunt. I think Jordan Davis is going to get better this year. You know that you're going to get at least like 5 to 7 sacks from Azeez Ojulari if he stays healthy. I have high hopes for Joshua Uche. You got to also throw Jahad Campbell in this equation, the first-round pick that's going to play some edge. So the Eagles, to me, like, yeah, they lost Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, but I'm not going to put the Eagles below number 2 when they just made Pat Mahomes run for his life for 4 straight quarters, and they have maybe the best player in this division at this spot in Jalen Carter, and a top 5 guy at this spot in Nolan Smith. So the Eagles are number 2, so not far off, and then I think the Cowboys are 3 and the Commanders are 4. Washington, this is where they could regress a little bit. Like, they lost some pass rushers. Their leading sack getter from 2024, Dante Fowler Jr., he left to go to the Dallas Cowboys to pair up with Micah Parsons. So that's a good get for Dallas, taking him from a division rival. Jonathan Allen, their longtime defensive tackle, he went over to Minnesota. So Washington, D.C. lost some good players up front. So they're 4th to me. And then Dallas, they added Fowler, and I thought they got a steal in the 2nd round in Boston College edge rusher Donovan Ezereku, on top of having Micah Parsons and Ogizua. So that's a pretty solid defensive line as well. I would go, it's New York 1, Philly 2, Dallas 3, Washington 4. Outside of that, though, I think the Eagles are going to have the advantage moving forward. At linebacker, it's the Birds 1. I mean, they have a first-team All-Pro in Zach Bond. Nakobe Dean, when healthy, is one of the most underrated linebackers in football. Now you add Jahad Campbell to that equation and his multiple skill set. Like, they're number 1. And Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is, the fact that he's your 4th linebacker, I think he's going to be a really high-floor, solid starter for his career. Maybe it's not in Philly, but I think he's that caliber of player. Washington's number 2, and it's close. I think Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner. You know, we all know Frankie Louvu is the guy that jumps over the line of scrimmage during the tush push 1,000 times in the NFC title. But that's a really solid player that I wanted the Eagles actually to target in free agency last year. Before that they brought in, it was Zach Bond and Devin White. I liked the idea of Louvu, who was leaving Carolina. So that's a solid 1-2 punch. They're number 2. I'd say the Giants are 3. I do like Bobby Okereke. I think he's a good player. And then Dallas is 4. I don't love Dallas's interior. They've been having some issues there for a long time since the Leighton Vander Esch pick didn't work out. So it's crazy to say, but the Eagles have the best linebackers in the division. How far we have come. And then at cornerback, it's still Philly number 1. I think Q and Coop, they're probably the 2 best corners in this division. The Commanders, though, they're solid as well. I really like Trey Amos coming out of Ole Miss this year. Interesting rookie prospect. Marshawn Lattimore's a good player, except for when he plays the Eagles, because A.J. Brown absolutely owns that man. So I'm not scared of Lattimore at all. But it is a good 1-2 punch. I think Washington's 2, just like linebacker. And then Dallas and the Giants are 3 and 4. Not a strong group. I like Trayvon Diggs. Shavon Ravel is an interesting prospect, if healthy, coming out of East Carolina. But again, the secondary is kind of weak in this division. The Giants have Paulson Adebo and Deontay Banks. I think that's like the worst duo of the 4. But the Eagles, I think, with Q and Coop and potentially Keely Ringo breaking out this year, And even like the versatility of some of these safeties, like Drew Makuba might play a lot of slot corner this year, depending on what the role is with DeJean. I think the Eagles are number one here as well. Safety is where, again, on defense, they fall short of the top spot. I do think Reed Blankenship, Drew Makuba, Sidney Brown, that's going to be a much better trio than what they replaced CGJ with the last time he left in 2023. But losing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is, to me, still, even with Makuba, who I'm a big fan of, and I think Sidney Brown's going to take a big step this year, it still is a big loss. And so for me, I like the Giants' 1-2 punch of Holland and Newbin a little bit better than Blankenship and Makuba, just because it's more for projection in Philly. But the Eagles are still number 2 at safety. I think Dallas number 3, Washington's 4, and I really hate both of their 1-2 punches. It's probably outside of running back. Safety is maybe the second weakest position group of the East. But even though these teams really did improve on paper, like I like a lot of what these guys did, and I hate to say that because I hate all these teams as an Eagles fan. I will say, though, again, the Eagles, of every position, how many did I do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So of the 9 positions that I ranked, the Eagles are number 1 in 7 of the 9 spots. So still a pretty good place to be in. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, we'll wrap up this Thursday edition of the show. The Oklahoma City Thunder just won an NBA championship for the first time in franchise history, and I'll tell you why it makes me appreciate the current Eagles era that we're in. I'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. That's right, just 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. You can even read real customer reviews on their site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use our promo code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet, Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. All right, we are wrapping up this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. So I'm a big NBA fan, and I thought the playoffs this year were incredible. The finals were awesome. It sucks that Halliburton got hurt in Game 7. He was cooking. Started the game 3 of 4 from 3, and the Pacers were winning the game. It looked like the upset of upsets could have been done. It sucks it ended that way, but it is cool that the Oklahoma City Thunder got a ring. I love seeing small market teams that haven't won a championship before and have overcome a lot of tough obstacles. Like, they get it done and they win the championship when the league is not built for that kind of team to win a championship. It is a little bit more now with the second apron, and the NBA has kind of gone to a hard salary cap, but it's still hard. It's a lot harder for a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder to be a consistent title contender than it is the Los Angeles Lakers. And why their title makes me appreciate this Eagles era even more is what the Thunder overcame is something very similar to what Howie Roseman and the Eagles overcame in 2020. Both of these teams had a title window. The Thunder had Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Serge Ibaka. Like, that was a great era of NBA basketball in Oklahoma City from like 2010 to 2014, specifically 2012. And that era kind of collapsed on them quick. They traded away James Harden. Kevin Durant left them for Golden State. The Russell Westbrook era didn't work when they tried to expand that window with Paul George, Carmelo Anthony. Like, it just didn't work. And the Thunder, though, they instantly turned it around. It's one of the fastest, most impressive, it's one of the best rebuilds in the history of sports. And for them to do that in the NBA, in Oklahoma City, to that quickly go from one title window to another with a completely different core, especially in basketball, in a small market, is so impressive. It is so difficult. But the Eagles it's one of the best rebuilds in the history of sports, if not the best one. The Eagles are up there, though, too. Howie Roseman did a very similar thing in 2020, and watching that Thunder title win just made me be like, oh, I really appreciate the Eagles did this too, because most teams do not come back from what the Eagles and the Thunder went through. Like, the Eagles had this, 2017 and on title window, and they got it done. They won a championship, but they had this core, kind of like OKC did, and it quickly just fell apart. And by 2020, that roster was old, it was slow, it was injured, it was completely in ruins. It lacked so much talent. And the biggest thing was the Thunder core of their stars, Durant, Westbrook, and Harden, that dissipated pretty fast. The Eagles, their core, the two most important things in their franchise, the quarterback and the head coach, Carson Wentz, Doug Peterson, they also realized that wasn't for long either, and that those guys weren't the guys anymore. And that normally in football kind of sets you back just as much as losing stars would for a small market team in the NBA. Like, if you lose what's supposed to be the face of your franchise as a head coach and a quarterback, that you gave out like massive extensions to both of them, and they were supposed to be your guys for another 10 plus years, and you're building everything around them, and suddenly in a year or two later, they're not the guys anymore after those extensions. Like, some teams don't bounce back in just a couple years. Some teams take a decade plus to bounce back. And so the Eagles kind of did something similar to what the Thunder did. It was like, and with some luck, of course, because I don't think they anticipated Jalen Hurts being the guy. The Thunder probably didn't think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would turn out to be an MVP. So you do need some luck on your side. But you got to give credit to Howie Roseman doing something that, similarly to Sam Presti, turned them into a contender yet again. Both GMs did such a good... I love watching roster construction in sports. It's just so fascinating to me. Like, I do feel like I think more like a GM than a head coach or as a player when I evaluate and watch sports, and when I think about things. I think it's definitely more through a GM lens. It's why I talk about Howie Roseman a lot on this show. Both teams did a master job. It was masterclass work of just turning sunk costs, not holding on to these sunk costs, and turning it into the future. Like, turning these players that, yeah, you probably would have wanted to hang on to. A lot of it was them forcing your hand. Kevin Durant wanted out. James Harden wanted out. Eventually, Russell Westbrook wanted out. Carson Wentz wanted out. Doug Peterson was done listening to Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie's demands of his coaching staff. So a lot of it was out of their control, but good on them to just call it when it's over and try to make the best of it and turn it into what was the future. Like, what the Thunder did with the picks for, Russell Westbrook and Paul George, they turned that into this title core of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Williams and Chet. And the Eagles did the same thing. They turned Carson Wentz into A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Jordan Davis and Cooper DeJean and Jalen Carter. Like, they literally turned the face of the previous core into the majority of the new core. And that is very difficult to do. So props to the Eagles, props to the Thunder. I think that's such a difficult thing to do in sports, and it's very hard to... It's not always hard to sustain success, but when you do it in the way these two franchises have, with completely different eras, but in such a short amount of time where they didn't have to completely reset and build this thing from the ground up for a decade plus. It only took the Eagles a couple years. It only took the Thunder a couple years after the Westbrook-Paul George era. They made the playoffs the next year with Chris Paul. They took 1 year to take a step back and won like 23 games, and they were back to being a play-in team, and then made the playoffs last year, got to the second round, and then won a title. The Eagles, they had one 4-win season in 2020. They made the playoffs as a wild card in 2021, then were right back in the Super Bowl a couple years later, and then won a Super Bowl a couple years later after that. So Sam Presti and the Thunder just made me appreciate what the Eagles are doing right now too, because when you talk about like what OKC did, it's one of the best rebuilds of all time, and it's like what other ones are just as good. I think it's a short list of teams you're going to get to before you get to the post-2020 Philadelphia Eagles. I think what the Eagles did post-2020 is one of also the most impressive, fastest rebuilds for a collapsing title contender that we've seen in the history of sports. And it's led to what we have now, and it's long-term, I think, championship contention in the city of Philadelphia. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Another show for you tomorrow, so make sure you subscribe on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.